Easter Island, Rapa Nui, or Tapito Otahenua could be the original name of the island, given to it by the Rapa Nui people who first lived here. They're the ones who made those giant moai statues. There's this story that they destroyed their own civilization by using up all of their island's natural resources and then spiraled into some bloody, violent war, toppled all the statues, and then cannibalized each other or something. But when Dutch sailors first encountered them in 1722, and they wrote down everything they saw, what they describe is a population that was thriving and happy, with well-organized plantations and enough food to share. Their statues were all standing, and they were all happy, generous, and peaceful. All of the Europeans they met in the 1700s, the Dutch, the Spanish, the British, the French, all of them said the Rapa Nui came to meet them completely unarmed, no weapons at all. And one Spanish officer was so amused by this that he apparently gave a bow and arrow that he'd made to an islander just to see what he'd do, and wrote, "He instantly stuck it on his head as an ornament, and then hung it around his neck with much joy, being totally ignorant of its use and effect." Easter Island, Hawaii, and New Zealand make up the three distant corners of what's called the Polynesian Triangle. And when you're looking at it on a globe, it seems almost impossible that a place so small and so remote could be discovered by people who had to sail against the wind for at least 3 weeks, probably more, into the unknown with no promise that they'll discover anything. But that's exactly what they were doing. Around maybe roughly 900 years ago, a renewed burst of energy in the Pacific led to the longest ocean voyages in human history at that point. And it's also during this period that the South American sweet potato started being grown everywhere in Polynesia. Very compelling evidence that these explorers went as far east as it was possible to sail and didn't somehow miss a whole continent. New genetic evidence is supporting this idea as well, meaning Christopher Columbus and his crew probably weren't the first, second, or even the third people to discover the New World. Anyway, in the early 1900s, a British archaeologist and anthropologist named Katherine Routledge was going around the island interviewing the oldest members of the community to document everything they could remember about traditional Rapa Nui life pre-Christianity. And, not surprisingly, they have their own oral history about the first settlers on the island. They say their ancestors came from a pair of islands called Marae Renga and Marae Tohio, and that there was some drama involving the hero of the story, Hotu Matua, who wanted to be the new ruler after his father, but he was defeated by his brother. And that ended up turning out for the better, actually, because Hotu Matua, not to be outdone, decided he would organize an expedition to go and colonize another island far away. And so 6 men were sent ahead of the rest to learn about this island and get started on planting some crops, and they did. But the first crops failed. The 100,000-year-old volcanic soil was lacking important mineral nutrients, and that would be a problem that needed a solution. But the story goes on, and the main settlers arrived on 2 boats called Oteka and Oa, with Hotu and his wife Fakaya Hiva and their kids, and a man called Hinalilu and a woman called Averepua, and an evil child murderer stowed away called Oroi, who was Hotu's nemesis. Archaeological evidence can't confirm these details, or if Hotu actually had supernatural powers that he used to make his boat faster so it could get to the beach first, but it can tell us that the island at this time was home to a species of giant palm trees, perfect for building seaworthy boats and enabling more long-distance voyages, but it also tells us that in 370 years, those trees were extinct. So, is it true that the islanders foolishly destroyed the island's ecology, or could there be another culprit, known to wreak havoc on delicate island ecosystems that arrived with the people on their boats? An invasive species that eats everything, including palm seedlings, and multiplies like crazy, the Polynesian rat. Well, it's true that burning trees would have cleared space and provided nutrient-rich soil that the early settlers needed to survive. The unsustainability of it led to the use of rock mulching instead, a technique known on other islands. It's estimated that 2 million tons of rocks were moved for the purpose of enriching the soil with their minerals. But moving rocks was a way of life on Easter Island. They built massive ahu platforms for the moai to stand on, doubling as a resting place for the cremated remains of people who had died. They stood overlooking a communal space with houses built on the other side, facing the statues. Multiple families could share a home where they would eat and sleep together inside. By the way, there are statue building traditions on other Pacific islands, but the Rapa Nui took it to a whole new level. Almost all of the moai statues came from a single quarry on the side of a crater called Rano Raraku, where they were carved from the lightweight stone called tuff. But they could still weigh up to 86 tons. Transporting them around the island required the construction of special roads and some creativity. It's actually been demonstrated that some of the statues could have been moved quite efficiently by rocking them back and forth so that they walk forward, sort of like you would move a refrigerator that's too heavy to lift. The 10 communities that developed on the island over time could have found these communal projects useful for promoting peace, but the spiritual significance of these statues was crucially important too. Belief in supernatural forces is made clear in Routledge's work. Shape-shifting spirits called tatane could be protective and kind, or jealous, selfish, and cruel. For example, in one story, there were 2 evil woman spirits called Kavaara and Kavatua who lived up in a cave on the cliffside of Parehe. They had been hearing about a beautiful man named Urea Hohove who lived near Hangaroa, and they decided to kidnap him. So they went down, put him to sleep, and brought him back up to their cave where they left him. While they were gone, a kind old woman spirit came in secret to give him food, and she warned him not to eat the food offered to him by his kidnappers. So when the women came back and offered him food, he only pretended to eat it. Later on, when he was alone again, the old woman came back with more instructions. She said, "If you see a cockroach, kill it. And if you see a fly, also kill it. But if you see a crab, don't kill it." And she left without elaborating. But the man did as he was told. He saw a cockroach and killed it. Then he saw a fly and killed it. But when he saw a crab, he spared it. It turns out that the cockroach and the fly were the evil spirits in animal form, and the crab was the kind old woman. Meanwhile, Ure's father had been weeping for his missing son, until he was told by 2 fishermen that they had actually seen Ure up in that cave while they were out in their canoe, but they refused to try to climb that cliff. Thankfully, there was a brave woman who volunteered to rescue him, but instead of climbing up to the cave from below, she was lowered down in a net from above. And she rescued him, and everyone went home. And that's it. If you ever visit Easter Island, you can see a unique female moai at the Anthropological Museum. The basalt moai that's currently at the British Museum is also very unique for being originally housed inside one of the 53 stone structures at the ceremonial village of Orongo. This is a special place on the rim of Easter Island's largest crater, overlooking the tiny island Motunui, where migratory seabirds nest. Each new year was named after the winner of a competition to retrieve the first eggs laid by the birds they called Manutara. Later on, some young Manutara hatchlings were taken and ritually fostered. They were kept until they were fully grown and ready to be released in time to join the migration of the rest of the flock. But first, these special birds had pieces of red cloth tied to them and were given some parting words. Kaho Kitahiva. Go to the world outside.